I'm going to call the meeting to order. And I would just like to remind everyone to speak into the mics, get up close so Jason can hear us good. The mics are normally set for the council, and so there's going to be a little bit difference here. And so again, please speak into the mics, don't lean back in your chairs. We're going to start out the meeting tonight. Just so you know, we are specifically talking about item 3 in our emergency, or excuse me, in our 2080 agreement. We're going to focus specifically on that. I'm going to say a few opening remarks, and then Dee's going to say a few things. And then Doug's going to lay some groundwork, and then Chauncey also will say some groundwork, and then we'll have discussion and questions after that. So that's going to be kind of our order here. So I want to thank everybody for coming tonight and having this shared meeting. I really want to express our desire to continue our relationship with the county, to maintain the Law Center building, and to keep a good working relationship. And I think that's what you all desire too. So we have no plans to move or relocate the dispatch anywhere out of the Law Center. Our desire and intention is that all dispatch employees remain city employees. We want to take the burden and the stress of their job uncertainty right now away from our employees and assure them that their positions, wages, and benefits are certain and will not be changing. Our desire is to put the last 18 months behind us, miscommunication, and turn a new page tonight and start anew and help us find a solution. We want a good relationship with the county, and good communication is key to any relationship, so I look forward to a fruitful discussion tonight and a respectful one. So Dee, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. I'm Dee Sandquist. I'm here as the chair of the Board of Supervisors. I'm also the chair of Emergency Management and vice chair of 911. And we are here in response to the letter we received from the city regarding dispatch. And that is part of a 2080 agreement. And if you haven't seen it, it includes more than dispatch. So this was opened up in November by the city, so all of it is now on the table. So the letter we received is only regarding dispatch. And I think it's important we all speak the same language. One thing I've learned in government is everybody has a different vocabulary. And so tonight, we're here to talk about the 2080. And that does not involve 911, that's a separate board. Emergency management is a separate board. Yes, they're all interrelated because it's important they all work together because they all support processes that result in good communication for emergency services. So it's like a three-legged stool. You have dispatch, the building, and the communication equipment that is in the 2080, which is what we're here to discuss. And so we feel that we want to talk about the whole thing, and Chauncey will give us more details. He's passed out written comments because we want people to know our position. But most importantly, we need to work together for all the residents of the county, whether you live in Fairfield or in Lockridge or rural county somewhere. We all want to have services when you call 911, and that is very important. So we have the 2080, we have emergency management and 911, which are all interrelated, but we are here, the Board of Supervisors and the City Council, because this is our agreement which addresses only the Law Center operations. So that said, Doug, I guess you're next.
Yes, okay. Thank you. All right, so the agenda item was dispatch center. So I went through the 28E agreement, section 3, which describes the relative responsibilities for the city and the county with regard to the dispatch center. So I just wanted to go over those. I just took them for quote out of the document I have here on dated June 17th. I know we just got an updated one tonight, dated 2013, but it's essentially identical except for the one that's the Iowa system's been added, and I'll include that here. So according to the 28E for the dispatch center, The city's responsibility is the expense of all radio dispatchers, operators. All said operators and dispatchers shall be employed by the city and administratively report to city personnel. 2, cost of all liability insurance for the radio operator dispatchers shall be borne by the city. 3, continuing education of operators dispatchers, if specific to police department or fire department, will be paid at the expense of the city. The county's responsibilities are: 1, the county shall issue liability insurance arising for county-related acts or communications, and the continuing education of operator dispatchers, if specific to the sheriff's department, shall be at the expense of the county. Shared responsibilities are continuing education of operator dispatchers, if general in nature or required by certification, etc., by the city 33%, by the county 67%. 2, telephone expenses is a part of communications expense, and that all radio and other communications equipment will have from time to time to be repaired, maintained, and replaced, and that expense will be shared on by the agreed percentage of 33% to the city, 67% by the county. 4, radio equipment insurance costs will be borne 33% by the city, 67% by the county. Cost of access to the Iowa system will be borne 50% by the city and 50% by the county. So is that accurate?
Is that from the 1999-2080?
And then I went through the
13?
copy you gave me tonight, and I added the one about Iowa system.
Right, yeah, that's correct.
Otherwise, they're identical. Any questions about that?
I think so.
Okay. Does everybody have a copy of this budget sheet that Aaron prepared? Everybody should have one at their place setting. So on this budget sheet, the City of Fairfield dispatch budget, full-time salaries, $311,565. Overtime is $22,000. FICA, $25,520. IPERS, $31,216.38. Health care, $67,397. Is this next year's budget, Aaron?
Yeah, that's pretty close to next year's fiscal budget.
So the total for salaries and benefits is $457,698.38. We have budgeted in $8,000 for training, and I'm going to ask Sharon Pester, our dispatch supervisor, to elaborate on the training aspect for the operators and dispatchers. And in particular, the 28E outlines four categories of training: police-specific, fire-specific, sheriff-specific, and general.
Okay. So most of our training is all general training. With our agency not being big, we don't have the breakdown of a call taker, a dispatcher for medical, a dispatcher for fire, or a dispatcher for law enforcement. So the girls have taken specific medical or specific fire and police training, but it doesn't pertain to what we do. So all of our stuff is just a general training. It varies from year to year because I've discussed before, it's all repetitive, so it's not, I mean, there's nothing really new. Within the past year, we have taken several different trainings from Nina and stuff like that. So.
But new employees have to be trained.
New employees have to be trained for 12 weeks, and then once the 12 weeks is up, they are out on their own. Within their first year of employment, they do have to attend the 40-hour academy up at the Iowa Law Enforcement Academy. They have to be certified in CPR and also become a notary. So that's also cost factors in there.
So the $8,000 in training scheduled for next year
Yes.
by the city is for what purpose?
So right now we are down one dispatcher. So approximately to get somebody up to full capacity where we're at, and once again, we learn on a day-to-day basis. Even me being there for almost 8 years, I'm still learning something new every day. So just to get somebody up to standard to work the console is approximately $6,000 in training. That includes 12 weeks of the salary, minus minimum wage. The academy right now is $375. That does not include lodging or meals. Depending on if the dorms are full up there or not. I know when I went, I was in a hotel because the dorms were full. So the notary is $30, renewal fee of $30 every 3 years to keep that up to date. And then our CPR is $27.50, and we renew that every 2 years.
So the $8,000 is the city's portion, or will that cover the entire expense?
That will cover, that'll be covering pretty close to the entire expense of what, if not, there'll be a little extra that'll be over budget.
So under the 28E, as I understand it, this county would be responsible for part of that
The
expense.
all of our training and everything gets billed through the city. We submit it through the city budget.
Okay.
So what we're saying is, it's general, the city's been paying for all of it, we really haven't been splitting it. And that's been the course of business for some time.
Right. We were
Okay.
also, we used to be EMD certified, which was emergency medical dispatching. That was paid through the E911 and like that, but we are no longer EMD certified. We figured it was more beneficial for our callers and our citizens to get first responders there than to sit on the phone with them and try to give them pre-arrival instructions.
So out of the current E91 funds that come into dispatch, none of it is being used for training?
No, because we don't, I mean, that was the only one that I was aware of.
Okay.
Okay.
Any questions?
Questions for Shannon?
Thank you very much. Okay, so there, aside from the city money I have here that I understand, is on the order of about $463,000 for next year. The E911 funds are on the order of $110,000. I don't know when those, Brett, can you tell us when those started coming into the dispatch? I'm sorry, can you, how long has E911 money been coming into pay for dispatch?
How long is 911? So we're going to correct that. It's no longer E911, it's just a 911. E911 was named for it when it became an enhanced 911. It's now 911. We are way past the enhanced, so the state of Iowa was taking off the E off of that. So 911 monies have been coming in. I can't tell you an exact date, but I've been doing this 6 years and we've always had the money.
Okay.
It's,
The 90s.
yeah, since the 90s sometime.
So that money was never incorporated in the 28E agreement as part of the budget. There's no understanding about how that money should be used in the budget for the dispatch center.
They have their own budget.
We have our own budget.
I know, but you're paying for some of the dispatch center
It's required
expenses.
by the state. If
Right.
we're going to get surcharge money, it has to be paid for certain items to fund a communications center. We can't just spend it on
Right.
vehicles and whatever we want. It has to be otherwise we turn it down. And so, no, it wasn't a part of the 28 agreement.
Okay. I'm just curious how long it's been around, so long time. That's what I
Long
thought.
time.
Okay, thank you. So the city's position is we feel that the citizens of Fairfield or the city of Fairfield is paying disproportionately higher amount than we should be for the dispatch center operations. So we sent a letter dated March 26 to the Board of Supervisors outlining a proposal to them, and I'll just read through the main points of that proposal. So we propose that the city take responsibility for all financial costs associated with the dispatch center. The city maintain employment of all current staff of the dispatch center. The county transfer ownership of all licenses to the city, and that all equipment purchased by the dispatch center become city property. So the idea would be to have this arrangement, if agreed on by the supervisors, to have the transfers and all the paperwork done by June 30th of next year, 2022, and then effective July 1, 2022, we would assume full responsibility for the dispatch center.
Is that all,
That's all I have.
Doug? Okay.
Chauncey.
Okay, Chauncey, go ahead.
Thanks. So the county is here essentially in response to the letter as Doug outlined, and I think that fairly sets forth the city's request that, and there's a lot of talk going around about some relatively convoluted issues, and as a means of explaining how this got so complicated, these 2080s have been building on each other. So if everybody recalls, the Law Center was on 2nd Street there where Public Health and the Fire Department is now. The original 2080 for this cooperation was signed in 1971, and the Law Center Operations 2080 was signed in 1999, which builds on the 71 2080. And there is a 2013 2080 that is of principal concern here that specifically deals with dispatch that was put together in 2013. So long story short, these things, they build on each other, and there is kind of, it's the nature of a system like this to have a long history and a lot of kind of complicated ties back. And also, as we can see, that they keep building on each other, that the last 2080 was signed in 2013, probably shows that it's ripe for some redress and some reconsideration, and it's probably excellent that we're all in the same room, or the stakeholders are in the same room, to try and hash out some concerns that develop over time. No document is perfect, and some issues that have arisen with the city's concerns were not anticipated in 2013 or any of the prior agreements. But I think it's easier for arguments and considerations and discussion's sake to try and boil these convoluted issues down into a simpler kind of, it's easier to think about it when we simplify the issues. And I think the real issue here is that we've opened up the 2080 agreement back in November to address the city's concerns. But the letter that was sent in March or dated in March, simply put, and I apologize if I'm oversimplifying here, but it reads to the county that the city is essentially requesting that the county turn over all licenses and equipment to the city, and that dispatch become a city-managed operation. In simple terms, that's as easy as I can read that letter, and that's how the counties interpret it. And the county has some concerns about that proposal. I think that Dee outlined a couple of them, but I'm going to run through three principal ones, which are, the first one is that just simply as a financial matter, the county has invested substantial capital into particularly the equipment that operates dispatch. That gear is expensive: radio equipment, towers, panels. All of those things are expensive, and frankly, they're getting more expensive as time goes on. These, as I'm sure John would attest to, this isn't like it was in the 80s where there was, a guy with a radio and a cup of coffee. It's this is millions of dollars of capital outlays that the county has particularized interest in, and it would not behoove the residents and the citizens of the county to just walk away from those interests. And secondly, there is the issue of the broader scope of the county's concerns over the ability to effectuate effective communications to the entirety of the county. The system as it exists today works. It doesn't work perfectly, obviously. Getting radio frequencies to get down into the low water crossing areas and other areas of the county that are far removed from the tower is an issue that needs to be perpetually addressed and looked at. So ensuring that emergency communications are always effective, or as effective as possible, as often as possible, is a strong concern for the county, and that requires substantial financial outlays, as I mentioned previously. So while they work now, there are some substantial investments that need to be made to maintain that gear and that equipment at a fully functioning state. And the county's buy-in in this operation gives the county a sense of security that those communications will be maintained in the entirety of the county. I mentioned in the letter that there is 437 square miles of territory within the county. I believe, I checked on Wikipedia a couple days ago, I think the city of Fairfield is somewhat less than 3 square miles. So the actual logistics of ensuring emergency communications to the entirety of the county is a much broader logistical concern than just making sure that a radio works from one side of the city to the other. And the county's by no means suggesting that the city would just walk away from the ability to reach out to, Packwood and Lockridge and places like that. But obviously, based on the county's scope, relinquishing any control over that communication gear and process would, I think, keep some people up at night. Just making sure that, when a deputy is out there on the southeast corner of the county and he calls into the center, that it's certain that radio is going to work. And in reading into the letter and in some conversations that have, this conversation has been happening since at least 2018. It's the county's understanding and my understanding that the city's expectation is to find a way to recoup the financial expenditures on dispatch by trying to get the county residents and then the outlying communities, Packwood, Lockridge, Libertyville, to pay their fair share. Everybody agrees that this is something that everybody should pay for, but the means on collecting from these outlying jurisdictions is in question. In reviewing the percentage of the county population in this budget, Pleasant Plains, 0.4%, 3% of Batavia. These are small jurisdictions with less population than the city of Fairfield, and I think that is reflected by the number of calls for service to these jurisdictions. But I'm not sure how the city would be able to legally enforce a financial claim upon the city of Pleasant Plain for the number of calls for service out there, unless there is another 2080 arranged or some other agreement with these jurisdictions. So I think there's a lot of legwork to be done if that's the expectation, to take over dispatch and then bill the municipalities for the service. I don't see how that could happen easily without them agreeing and buying in. So those are some of the concerns that the county would have for turning over the keys to dispatch to the city. But the conversation is a good one, and I think that the county is certainly glad for the last 50 years of cooperation and hoping that we can maintain this into the future. But sharing this liability and this burden and this responsibility of ensuring emergency communications kind of helps everybody make sure that it's going to work. So keeping it a shared responsibility is what the county is kind of hoping that we can maintain. Thanks.
Okay. John, do you want to
Yeah, I'll say a
contribute
little
anything
bit.
at this moment?
Yeah, am I on?
Yeah.
I am.
Oh,
Okay.
yes.
Chauncey and I have talked about this before, and I've been in on the Zoom and so forth. I'm also the oldest man in the room, I think. And I was around, it wasn't 1971, but that's when we started on the 28E road. I was around by 1974 when the Iowa legislature passed an enabling act to let us have a 28E agreement on the law center over on Briggs. And that was new stuff at the time, and it worked just fine over there for 30 years. And when we built the new law center, we used that as a model for a success. It's like Chauncey said, it started out sort of like having a man in a room with a radio and a rotary phone. And that changed This was a different era. It was before ERA or Me Too or anything else as far as trying to get gender balance. But we had dispatchers that were also court attendants when a woman had to go to court, and also matrons, all wrapped up in one. And that went on through the 80s. The jail inspector started coming down and laying new rules and things on us, and there was a lot of movement also towards some other things that were trying to balance gender. But by the 90s, 911 was here. We had a new source of funds, and we had more emphasis on emergency than we'd had before. During the 80s, we had a local resident, Walt Gary, that was doing most of the ambulance service, not only for us, and we were learning from him, and in 16 other counties too. And when we looked at what we were doing here, not just for police and for sheriff, the emergency medical and EMT and first responders were a question mark, and the various fire departments around our area were also things that we were trying to deal with and be effective about. And that whole emergency management notion and the 911 notion made sense as far as that money's going to get spent doing things. And I didn't know that E had been taken off of the enhanced 911 either, but as far as by the time we got to the law center and got it built, and we're doing this sit down again in the late 90s, we were looking at the agreements we had. The other one that we started with after 72 that got authorized by the legislature in 74 was the one in 1984 that then gave rise to what we adopted in the late 90s for the new center. And all of those basically have about the same language in them, and they all were predicated on the idea we're going to share things that's going to be better for the taxpayers, and it's going to be balanced. And somewhere along the way, some of the things maybe went out of balance in different directions. And for instance, when we were talking about this in 18 and 19 here on the city side, I didn't realize that the small towns weren't part of the mix as far as how things were being assessed for the cost of this. And that's 10% of the package as far as the different small town percentages of per capita, but 10% substantial. So that was one thing we wanted to address, and I know that Dave and Aaron have been out and talked to some of the small communities as far as the idea that they've had a nice ride for a while as far as not having to be part of the cost on this, but we're looking for a way to get this so that it's totally across the board shared expense throughout the population in the county. And that's just one goal of having this discussion. Another part of the circumstance as far as dispatch, it didn't used to be a situation where we had as many dispatchers or as many things dispatchers had to do. In the 90s, there was a sort of a supervising dispatcher, but we also were with a jail inspector over our shoulder before we built the new jail and had a task force to get that done. We had, every year we had some questions, and our dispatch group at the time, like Shannon said, they were learning as they go, and they still are learning as they go, but we had spot checks on city and county liability, and I know I can say that at least for 4 years, because I had both the county attorney's hat on and the city attorney's hat on, that we checked against checklist notebooks they have as far as protocols for almost every emergency question that you could have come through the dispatch phone. And we felt that we were in pretty good sync as far as having the county calls covered, the city police call covered, the responders and the EMT calls and the fire calls covered, with those protocols that were checklists, basically. And that was a liability incursive type of research that we did, that we were real comfortable about where we were at that time. And I'm still real comfortable that that's what happens with these trainings that are shared costs right now between our groups. So there's positive things to say every year since we got the new agreements at the end of the 90s. And the fact that we looked at it in 2013, that was, I think, the first time that I think we might have talked a few times about some things we had question on, but the first time we sat down and rewrote parts of this, but they still ended up looking like what we had before. So at this point, the city isn't really advocating not having what we did before on practically everything. And even, I think one of the misconceptions between some people as far as the way things run right now, and if we did something different as far as calling it the City Dispatch Center instead of the Jefferson County Law Center Dispatch Center or Jefferson County Dispatch Center, is I don't think the city, as far as what it was proposing when we talked about having emergency management do a small levy, envisioned anything different out there than has gone on for the last 45 years. I think it was more a situation of, we've always had an understanding since the 70s that there's going to be a chunk of the law center, if it's a shared law center, and that's best for the taxpayers, that would be what the statute requires. And the statute mandates that the sheriff and the county provide a jail. And there's a case, City of Marshalltown, back in the 80s that the Iowa Supreme Court said, you got to do that. It's a responsibility. And so let's say with our current law center facility, we've operated under the presumption always that at least a third of that facility is taken up by jail and jail-related premises. And that is a statutory responsibility of the county. It also figures into, though, over the past 50 years, it figures into the parts that have to do with the law center ratios in the past of 75% here versus 25, or 67% versus 33. There's always going to be a part of it that looks smaller for the city because the city doesn't have a statutory responsibility for the jail part. The rest of it, though, I would say in the discussions that went into 98 and 99 to get the 28E agreement updated from 1972, 74, and 84 agreements to what we did then, the idea was we're going to stay pretty much with the same ratio in the new building, and that always assumed that there was a space that was a shared space for dispatch. And that became more defined in the new law center than it was in the old law center. The old law center used to be a sliding glass window, and your sheriff could slide the window open and yell at the dispatcher if there was a problem, and it wasn't all intercom and things like that. It was just a different era. But right now, both entities, the police and the the sheriff's department, have in the middle of their facility that shared space that is dispatch. And I don't think the city, for whatever we were going to call the change under the way this got funded or the expensing, anticipated that we would come out of that space. That's still a space that's just as successfully used now as it was in the old center, and just as successfully used as it was when anything changed in 2013. And I think both the sheriff's department and the police department would tell you that the dispatch works well shared. So having said all that, we still, I think, to talk about how things balance out, it isn't just about the small towns assuming a share of the cost. There's also the fact that about 2/3 of the population in the county lives in Fairfield, and they carry a fairly significant percentage of tax base and pay taxes that is for the privilege of having all of these services that are provided by the police and the sheriff and dispatch. As far as how that works out, though, as far as when you look at things like capital outlay versus manpower, and you look at things that are there, but they're there partly not because of the city-county tax scheme, but because there are things that come off of emergency management funding, the 911 monies that are a surcharge. That's a different kind of money. And so when we were talking last fall about this, we wanted to know what is the outlay that goes in for your capital things like radio equipment and communication equipment, towers, wires, and those kinds of things, plus how that not just costs, but how it is funded, and also whether there weren't some alternative ways to fund it. And that's where this emergency management small levy was proposed, is we felt maybe that was a better way to make sure that everything in the county was accounted for as far as people paying for the service that benefits them everywhere in the county. And that was going to, I think, depending on whether it was 30 cents a thousand or 40 cents a thousand, was going to generate a pot of about $500,000, which would subsume a huge part of the budget for running dispatch, and we were just going to call it that. So that was the proposal back last November, is why don't we see if EMS, Emergency Management Board, would consider adopting that levy. Well, that didn't happen, plus I think it set us off on different courses as far as how are we going to manage this. We started talking on the city side about, if we just take it over completely, some of that I think got turned into us proposing, or the assertion that we were proposing to take it out of the law center, which I don't think that's ever physically been said. But the other part of it was, and we understood, nobody liked to talk about a new levy. But this was a very small levy, and it was also something that tied in exactly with what we were talking about as far as the purpose for benefiting everybody in the county, all of the population, with the same service, at which point part of that would be a benefit to the county as far as the county not having to spend general funds from its budget towards what it's doing on its side of shared costs on this 28E agreement, and the other side of it would put, at least we thought, $200,000 or $300,000 back at the city side, not coming out of our budget, but rather it would be just applied for an emergency service that the code provides a levy for. So that was where we were when the Emergency Management Board decided not to do the levy. They considered it, but they didn't decide to do it. And at that point, a month or so later, we put together a letter saying we're thinking about doing this to try to get balance back for the city as far as the cost that's being expended. The whole time this was going on, though, too, I would say we were assuming we were going to get some information from the county. My understanding is we did get some information this week from the county. Is that right? Or was it last week?
I haven't gotten anything.
Didn't some stuff get sent over to us about the
Well,
911 budget being?
well, we got detail on 911 budget
Okay.
for the last few years,
Can I
and
speak to
then
that?
well, let me make one other point. And then back in March, just so everybody knows, I went to the county auditor, and I think it was Shannon who gave me the Sheriff's Department expenditures since 2017. However, it's more in general terms, so we're not really clear about what actual expenses are in here for dispatch, and that's the detail that we'd still like to have, but we don't have. So, but we do have detailed information of the 911 funds that come in. So,
Okay.
Yeah, and I respect what Chauncey said to us, Your Honor and boards, that there are some anticipated longer-term capital outlays that we really don't know what's staring the county in the face without the county telling us that. And at the same time, we know that technology changes every so often. Every time Motorola sends us a new bill, it's outrageous, I guess, as far as the way I'd put it. But there are just things we have to keep up with and not get hacked, I guess.
Yeah.
But the rest of what we look at as far as capital outlay is things that might come from a levy or that we might get a grant for, or things that have been paid for in the past one way that might be paid for in a different way now. Those are all unanswered questions that we thought it would be productive to bounce back and forth between our two governmental bodies and see if we can't get some more information as far as wherein is the balance on this. Because I don't think the county ever set out intentionally to knock us out of balance by having something some year where you had a pass, because I don't think the county had a pass in any year. But at the same time, whether it was twice the amount of the 911 budget that the county spent that year, or whether it was some 911 budget and not much else, we want to see if there have been some years like that. And at the same time, there are things like the towers and so forth that every time something happens, it costs you $50,000 at least, and we aren't necessarily privy to some of that. I remember Greg Morton telling us that that was all available, and I guess we have the sheriff here tonight. Bart, did you share some of that with Greg since Greg decided to go south?
hey, John, do you want to,
Yeah, let me make a couple
before you
comments.
answer,
Then I want
Dee wants to
Bart-
say something, then
'cause
she'll.
Sure.
Bart has the numbers, all those lie in his budget, and they've been able to pull them out, and it's taken a while, but the simplest way to look at it is because of the agreement in the 2080, some of the expenses are 50/50, some are 67, 33, and some are 75/25. So at minimum, you could go to whatever the city pays, and then the county pays at least that balance farther. That's the simplest way to look at it. But to look at the actual numbers, they're mixed in with the overall budget. But at the end of some of the numbers, there's like a 5.3 code and a 5.9. And all of those are divided between the city and county depending on which
Okay.
expense they're for in the whole 2080. And Bart knows that. I don't know that we can go into a lot of details tonight. What I would propose is from tonight that we get, if there's a small group that wants to really go through that, do that. If the big group wants to, it'll be a really long, boring meeting if you don't like numbers. But Bart, I know you've done a lot of research on this, so please share that. And some of the tower expenses of the recent tower that was put up.
Yes. So the numbers you have are the budgets are the ones I sent. I mean, I sent them to Aaron's email. So you got those directly from me. That's what I have to work with. So I did go back 34 months from April. So 10 months of the budget year with 2 previous budget years and compared. Currently, the city has reimbursed less than $61,000 as of April to like over $400,000 to the county on this 2080 agreement. Meaning expenses that fall under the 2080. The year before, the city was about 102 to, I think we spent $500,000 or more. The year before, the city spent $99,000. And I think we had $450,000 on these shared expenses. So that's how it's coming out. The city's fallen somewhere around $100,000 on shared expenses. And you know, the jail's been mentioned. We don't bill anything for that. I mean, there is a clause, and you can probably answer this, Chauncey, that, we don't have to accept anybody until seen by a magistrate. And the magistrate has 24 hours to see somebody. So there's a 24-hour period where we're providing housing, food, medical cost. We have personnel that's taking all those. The city currently is running about 55% of our arrests.
Just to clarify, Bart, they're city prisoners until seen by the magistrate, at which time they become the county's responsibility.
But we're housing them for the first 24 hours. So there's a lot of expense with the jail too, and I don't want to get in an argument over that, but with salaries and benefits back there, I'm spending $1 million a year. This whole thing, you have people here representing the city, you have people representing the residents of the county. I got to think of both sides. What's best. I don't want this thing to grow into something that it's not. And there's a few other points I wanted to make. But, just looking at the numbers when this thing started, you mentioned 2 other commissions, and this is considered the service agency agreement between the 28E, City of Fairfield and the county. And, these numbers are getting all thrown out, and we're not sure they're real accurate. Each year, the state requires us to send in a report. It involves communications and dispatch. The last report the city turned in, they said they had an expense somewhere around $360,000, $370,000. We added to the report, Brett added to the report, I think it was almost $900,000. From that number, they determined how much of that surcharge money we're getting. So I know Aaron's come up with $455,000, tonight $463,000. In January, under the levy, it was almost $780,000. So, I'm thinking of all taxpayers. And I don't necessarily agree with the tax levy. I mean, if we can come to an agreement. I've offered to take over the employees,
And thanks, Bart. And I just want to be clear. This document I have right here, I went to the auditor's office and
You
got
might
it.
have, but I did send, you said dating back to 17, I did send 3 budget years.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So I have a question for you. Do you feel that the service agency has done its due diligence to provide a budget to that board every year?
To what board?
To the service agency board.
Well, the service agency consists of the people you have assigned
Right.
to the service agency. I believe there's
And-
2.
And from one standpoint, I don't want to get off on just what service agency. My point is, my understanding is that budget hasn't been really clear to the board, or it hasn't been presented that brings in all these entities. Brings in the city that says we're paying this much, and the county saying we're paying this much, and the 105 or 110,000 is coming from 911 to do the dispatch. So is that a process that we aren't doing effectively, and we need to do a better job of it so these expenses are really more clear? And then once that budget is clear within service agency, that can go to the county and city so that they all understand what expenses are coming from which entity.
Can I make a comment?
Right?
So in the 2013 copy of the 28E agreement that Chauncey gave me tonight, Section 7, Part I, it says here, said representatives of the Jefferson County Service Agency shall likewise annually determine the funds necessary for the joint expenses of operation of the law center. They shall adopt a budget annually for said joint operation by January 15 of each year. That the contributions for such budget shall be divided between the Board of Supervisors and the City Council by the ratio set forth in this agreement. And it goes on about operating expenses for the service agency. So I've been on the service agency, the first time I was appointed was I first was elected 8 years ago. I've never seen that agency receive a budget about this building, ever.
Well, it's a good question. I'm not sure that
Yeah.
that's been asked for or that
Yeah.
we sat down and talked about it.
Yeah. And-
Since 1971, because there's a copy from 1971. So I believe it's only been adjusted like 4 times. Well, I think there was one before we moved to the new building. There was one at 99 and then that 13 one. So this isn't something they were examining numbers every year, I don't believe.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to do a gotcha question here. I'm just was trying to get your opinion and wondering if that piece, if we get better at that piece, this is going to become a lot more clear for everyone.
I think it will, because the service agency, then the county can bring to that piece what they're spending on it, and the city can bring what they're spending on it, and then each entity can take it to their own entities.
I mean,
Because
is it-
that's really the group that does the 2080
Yeah, so the
oversight.
anticipated maintenance of the building, costs for training, costs for equipment, for next year's budget, those numbers are known. And we make a budget for next year, right? We know what we're gonna spend, we think, on dispatch center and the law center, and all those expenses are known. The portions that are pertinent to the 28E should,
It'd probably
Well,
come
be
to
easier
the
to
agency as a
backtrack
budget.
3 years and then,
The way I see it, and I sat back here and listened, I've listened to it called Dispatch Center, City Dispatch Center. From my side of things, there is no dispatch center. There is no jail center. There's Jefferson County Law Center. So it's not a separate entity. Department,
Right.
center, I mean, I don't know why we think that way. It's all part of the Jefferson County Law Center.
Well, I think we do. We as the city think of it as countywide, and to Chauncey's point, I want to appreciate what you said. We absolutely want to make sure that any communications goes where it needs to go, and we certainly wouldn't want any kind of issue in that way. And we're not trying to recoup old costs either. I wanted to make that point. Just that we were trying to make it equitable going forward. So, but I appreciate your point that we're all one county, and that dispatch center is a county-wide service. It's not just for the county. It's not just for the city. It's for everyone. And, so I think we're all in agreement with that.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Anything else?
no, it sounds like it's another evolution of the continuing 50-year relationship, whereas now, the service agency would get those numbers from your budget, because in the sheriff's budget, it's mixed in with everything else, and then get them from the city and sit down and look at them.
Certainly, in the overall agreement, the mutual agreement in the service agency, I can pull out numbers that directly go towards that 28E. The thing, everybody's focusing on dispatch center. We're going to pull that out. We want to know this. We want to know that. Well, the service agency starting in 71 agreed shared costs all the way around, not just dispatch. And I don't know why at that time that they agreed to be employed by the city, but they have been ever since.
Yeah. And again, I think we just need to make sure that everyone's clear about who's paying for what, and that it's fair all the way around. We wouldn't want either from the county side, if you felt it wasn't fair and we weren't paying our fair share, then we would need to fix that too. So, but it just seems like we don't know, and so we need to really get to the bottom of that. And I like Dee's point about maybe we put a committee of this group together to really dig into that and present the last 3, 4, 5 years, and present the budget going forward, because we've all laid out our budgets for this coming year, and so we know that there's expenses in there that we have for the law center, whether it's dispatch or not, and then go over those numbers and clarify some things.
I would agree, and I guess I've already been talking to the Board of Supervisors about some of the future expenses that possibly could be coming up.
Yes.
I mean, there's major upgrades, and I think was John mentioned Motorola,
Right.
huge expense.
And
Huge.
we need to plan for those things that are coming up for 3, 4, 5 years down the road. I think we all agree on that.
Okay.
Any comments from other supervisor, council members? Any questions? Anything to add? Do you think we're going down the right track?
Just on a overarching note, when we talk about the city separate from the county, the city's part of the county. We're like the majority of the citizens in the county. We're all Jefferson County residents. So I know that police and the sheriff's office are separated by who their jurisdiction is in terms of the government bodies, and they have this agreement. But the one point is simply that for many years, the city has, with the lack of information from the county, felt that we've been paying our citizens, our taxpayers have been paying a disproportionate amount for the dispatch portion of the 2080. So to your point, Bart, maybe there's other areas that are imbalanced as well that we could uncover. But this is the topic, and this is the only topic. So no one's, like we're saying, no one's trying to pull them apart. We like this partnership. We just want to make it equitable to the majority of the county residents who are city residents.
And everybody needs to be fully informed. And there needs to be clarity and transparency. So, next step.
Next up, well, I'd say there's two options. One option is the service agency, since it technically lies in there. Get together, and people on the service agency from the county are Darren and I. From the city, I believe it's Doug and Martha, right?
Right.
Correct.
And then Bart's on it, and Tammy Jones is the
Secretary.
public.
Yeah, public member.
The chairperson of the
She's the chair.
agency.
She's the chair.
She's the chair.
Okay. Do you want to set, well, I guess you'd have to check with her. Would you want to
I
try to
think
get
we
them to do a meeting by a certain time? You
No,
know?
I think Bart's got most of his numbers pulled. We just need to get it in a simplified summary form. We've got the last almost 3 years now at the end of this month.
We could do it from the end of this month, I guess.
And then talk about, I know, again, recently you did at least $95,000 last year on that new tower.
Yes, we did.
So do you think it would be possible to get your year-end numbers and have a meeting by have the service agency have a meeting by the end of July or end of August?
No,
Or what do you think is reasonable?
Middle
September?
September was summer. I don't
Middle
know.
September?
The service agency has an annual meeting in November.
In theory. In
Yeah, but it might
practice,
take more than one meeting. It'd be nice to have a prelim meeting, I think, to flush out any details and then maybe come back to that regular November meeting. So if maybe one could be done by the end of September,
Yeah.
and then that gives another month or 6 weeks to flush out any details.
And for those of us that are on that, the thing to do would be to get the copy of the 28E and literally bring any expenses that speak to that.
my gut reaction, if we follow the 28E to the letter, we will solve a lot of problems.
Mhm.
Because everything would be explained in that budget. All the expectations would be known. There wouldn't be any surprises. There might be some emergencies that come out that we could address on a case-by-case basis, but that happens all the time. So it's not unusual.
Yeah.
I wondered if I could ask Sheriff Richmond a question. Is the tower out by the shooting range, is that still a work in progress?
No, it's.
That's a,
The tower was at the courthouse, and it has been moved to Walden.
And it's all set now?
completed.
It's all fully functional.
Yes. The building had to be remodeled, reconstructed, all new electronics in there. There had to have been new antennas and wires run and supports and underground stuff. Yes, it's all been completed.
Yeah.
So we are operating off that tower, VHF, for all emergency services.
Yeah, I remember when the corporation that gave the tower was getting out of it, there was some inquiries about, is this going to be a year turnover? Is it going to be, and I just can't remember when that started, but I'm anticipating that you probably had expenses in multiple years to get that done.
Yes, those expenses did run, I believe over 2 budget years. So maybe it's split out between 3.
Okay.
It started, I think, 3 years ago.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about the progress on that. I
And,
just knew it was out
there
there.
was substantial amount of money spent to do that, and that's where we're at now. You know, we're having good communication with our fire departments now. I mean, they're reporting that they have great communication. The tower is taller. We can have people service it. They'll climb it. They wouldn't climb the other one anymore. So, yeah, I believe we can operate that way for a while. And we've got Motorola pushing for upgrades and new equipment, and the state's pushing interoperability. A lot of counties are spending millions of dollars. I don't think we need to go that far deep into it right now. But yeah, console upgrades. I mean, constant, everything's being replaced every 5 years. Okay.
I have 2 questions. One is, do you guys know the expense for removing the tower that's by the courthouse?
We have not put out a request for quotes for removal of the tower at this point. We did have some equipment from Natel that was on that tower. I believe they've removed that now and relocated it to another location. So
It's on the water tower over on B Street.
It's a matter of now trying to get out a request for quotes in order to be able to do that. So we haven't moved in that direction yet.
Yep. Well, see, that would be considered an expense in dispatch. What it seems is that if you look at this year to year, you're not going to get a total picture of what the county's expense is, because the city's expense for the salary is easily measured in a fiscal year, but the county's expenses are more sporadic. So I think we need to take a longer view, 5-year, 10-year snapshot, and there's just stuff we don't know. We, the city, don't know what your expenses have been. We just haven't gotten that data. So it would be excellent to, as we've said, have those numbers, and maybe they'll be eye-opening. Maybe there'll be some expenses we just didn't even know about, or upcoming expenses we weren't aware of. But I think the service agency meeting makes the most sense. That's what it's for.
Great. All righty. Any other comment or questions?
I have a thought, Your Honor, as far as the service agency functioning over the years, there have been a variety of times when something was discussed as far as a future anticipation. And I'm listening to Sheriff Richmond talking about some expenses he's anticipating again. Probably when there's something anticipated like this, the service agency's supposed to be kind of a bouncing off experience as far as things that look like they're coming down the pike that we want to jointly know about. So, you know, if we had maybe a part of our agenda at the service agency meetings for the new or unanticipated previously discussion, that might benefit us in the future as far as, you know, if there is, you know, obviously this tower takedown is an expense that's going to take you a while to know about, but probably out there in the future. I don't know, is there something new coming in radio technology, Bart, as far as the...
Every year.
The word is interoperability, right, Bart?
Correct. The big thing is the 800 megahertz is the way I understand it. I'm not a radio expert, but it's multi-band radio. and they can have talk groups, and there can be multiple communications happening at one time, is the way I understand it. So, you know, we're operating pretty good right now, better than we ever have. And at some point, I think we will have to upgrade. It's a matter of which way we go and how we proceed. You know, we're still going to have to operate VHF for a long time. There's no doubt about it. You cannot replace every radio in this county and to be on one system. There'd be no way. It'd be huge expense. And you know, there's 6 fire departments outside this county that actually have districts in or part of their districts in this county. So it involves a lot of people, but even if we start upgrading law enforcement, we're still going to have to keep that tower operational.
The new tower, not
The new tower.
tower on the courthouse lawn.
Right. Correct.
Right.
Maybe the goal of the Jefferson County Service Agency should be to start developing a 5 or 10-year plan for total expenses for that building.
That's just what I was going to say, Doug, is that we should work on that as well this fall.
Correct.
The next 2 or 3 years we can know pretty well. After that, it's kind of guesswork, but we should be able to get a pretty good idea of what we can expect to come up in the next 5 or 10 years.
And over the last few years, several years, you know, when Greg was still there, some of your major maintenance projects have been done. 13 HVAC units on the roof been replaced, a new roof, exterior painting, a large portion of concrete from Grimes all the way to the back on the city side was replaced. There's been some overhead doors replaced, interior doors in the jail. I mean, there's been some large expenses that, you know, we've kept up with it. And, you know, we're looking pretty good on the maintenance side of things. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
I remember when we had about 600,000 extra after the Law Center was built, and we thought, oh, we just got all this money. It's gone now.
It's pretty
amazing.
much gone. But
Yeah.
Pieces of equipment like HVAC on the roof, and the roof has a structural lifetime that engineers know what it is. So we know when the roof is going to be replaced again.
most likely, it reached about almost 20 years. It was a rubber material with rock on top.
Yeah.
Now it's that
Flat roof, right?
It's pretty much flat, yes.
Yeah.
So it's been upgraded to that new material, and just over the last few years, all those units been replaced.
So we should be able to do this.
What's that?
We should be able to do this, put a 10-year plan together.
That'd be a good idea.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Mystery.
So John, I have one legal question. I didn't do a roll call at the very beginning. Do I need to do that or officially?
And somewhere we want to have that reflected in the minutes of this, so
Right,
maybe do it now.
okay.
If everybody,
Denise, I apologize. That's what happens when you just want to get to the point. So, and you can reflect in the minutes that we were all here through the whole thing, even though I didn't do roll call in the very beginning.
Ham,
Yes.
Hallie,
Yes.
Flournoy,
Here.
Gandy,
Yes.
Rasmussen.
Yes. Okay, do we need that for the supervisors?
well, I think we can share it. We don't have to have formal minutes because we're a work session.
Okay,
But at the same time, the fact that we're all here and we know who's here and who's not here, that will help us going forward as far as the next discussion.
okay, great, thank you.
I wanted to comment one more thing, if I could, Your Honor, on Chauncey's presentation and the small towns. There is statutory authority for if the city needed to go after enforcing bills on the small towns. And basically every small town is just like us at Fairfield. They still have the same responsibilities for emergency services, public safety, fire protection, and so forth. And they provide for it in different ways. Some of it's contractual, I'm sure that Sheriff Richmond has contracts with some of the outlying communities, and fire agencies sometimes overlap and so forth. But once the small town, and I've represented not half of them, but well, either myself or one of the partners in the past of the towns in the county, they know they've got that responsibility to contract for the services. They also know that the services all come packaged with dispatch. And if you show that it's part of what is a responsibility they have, just like we're talking about responsibilities tonight, that lends itself to, if necessarily, sending them a bill for the part of that package that dispatch gives them. It's never happened. I think it would withstand a challenge if any of them disagreed with it. My impression is, out of 2 or 3 of the towns that have been talked to, is they would agree with it. Isn't that your impression, Aaron?
When we talked to them, they understood that, yeah, that they have that obligation, but I don't know if they'd want to pay for it.
All right, well, I'm not trying to sell everybody a bill of goods on that yet, but that's our explanation for why we included that in what we had proposed earlier. And as far as our situation, as far as going forward, we're looking forward to the shared information and taking a look at maybe solutions after we know the whole picture.
Yep,
So.
great. Thank you, John. Bart?
Yes, I'd just like to make a comment. He mentions the contract law enforcement with these towns. It might be 40,000 if Pleasant Plain pays. I mean, more than happy, I think the county would give it back to some of the expenses for dispatch, but it's not a huge amount of money. It's very minor.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Okay, if no more comments, anyone? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Who's going to set the meeting for the service agency?
Tammy usually sets it because she's
Okay.
the chair.
Okay.
I move we adjourn.
Okay, moved by Flournoy,
Second.
second by Gandy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.